All right, let's demonstrate a painterly approach. Here are some images that were submitted by Diego. Thank you, Diego, for the idea here, for this concept. It is creating some art in the style of Grand Theft Auto. Here's a reference image. Looks like these are the source images, source image for the background, source image for the subject, and even a work in progress. First thing I'd like to do before I get into Photoshop is a little bit of a breakdown of the particular painting style. This would be a contemporary painting style. Let's just talk about what's going on in this image so that we can make a plan for how we might, emulate this style. So first of all, there's a subject and then there's a background. So in a way, it follows the genre of environmental portrait. It's portraying a person in an environment, and the environment is an extension of the character, the personality of the person. This is something that's just part of the genre of environmental portrait, and it's very much a motif that's active in these Grand Theft Auto style artworks. So when we look at the two elements of the subject and the background, I think it's easy to see a couple of things. One is that there is a certain amount of photorealism in the image, but it's not photographic. In other words, it's very important that there's illustrative styling going on, but that realism is important. One thing that I notice in this image, and I think it's pretty common in most Grand Theft Auto images, is that there's a lot more color and a lot more vibrant color in the subject compared to the background. This background here is characterized by a color cast. There's a much narrower color palette. This gold wash is muting down the color range, whereas the subject is obviously in the logic of the image is in the same space, but is in a completely different light, completely lit differently. We see a much wider color range. The colors are more vibrant, and yeah, so that creates a visual separation between the subject and the background. So that's an important consideration, I think, when we are building our own version, our own work in this style. I'll also notice that in the subject in particular, I'm not seeing it quite in the background, and I do think this is also consistent with GTA art, is that there's some kind of outlining. See, there's some there's a black stroke around the elements of the subject. This is very much in the style of illustration or comics. You see that it's the treatment is different in the background. There's no outlining. You'll see this a lot in kind of anime, where different types of artwork are just literally getting composited together to make the story, and it does create a visual attention, a visual priority. Your eye will look to things that have more contrast. That's just natural. You don't even have to think about it. So by creating outlines here in the subject, that's one level of contrast that's attracting the eye. You'll actually see this wider range of color also creates the possibilities for color contrast. And then within the color fields themselves, the tonal fields, there's a lot of contrast. See, like here in the arm, wrist, forearm, there's a lot of contrast there. In the opposite hand, in the red sleeve of the shirt, the face, etc. Lots of contrast all over the place on the subject. Not so much in the background. So we want to keep those things in mind as we consider converting this artwork into something that is a Grand Theft Auto style composite. In this work in progress, I would say that some things that we can do to improve this work in progress is create a little bit more separation, visual separation between the color range of the front and the back, the subject and the background. The background here looks to me to have the same amount of saturation and color range as the subject. We want to, maybe dial that down a bit in the background if we want to have an effect that's a little bit more like this. So we will look at the subject more immediately. Also, maybe bringing back some photorealism into this. I see that there's been some treatment to make this more graphic, more illustrative, something to bring back a little bit of photorealism. Vis-a-vis this reference, and then something to give us some more outlines. There are no outlines here, so some kind of outlining. Just a couple of things that we can do to to make it really feel like a Grand Theft Auto art. So let's grab these two and go into Photoshop and see what we can do. My approach is, I'm improvising right now, but my approach is probably going to be the following. I'm going to do some work on the subject layer. I'm going to document. I'm going to turn it into an isolated element that can be composited with my background. So I'll do some work here, take that work, and then start a build file. Once I've got it in here, I will proceed to make some adjustments, visual adjustments, so that we can lock in the style, that painterly style, all those things I just mentioned. And then we're going to work on creating the visual differences between the subject and the background, stylistically. And then let's see what else. And then, finally we'll do some cleanup. There's always kind of cleaning up that needs to be done. The work speaks to you. It tells you what needs to happen. So some of this demo is going to be procedural. Like, there are some basic things that we do need to do that you can apply a certain technique to any project that's attempting this. But then there's going to be some things which are just specific to this work and these images. So let's start. First of all, I want to take this subject and separate it from this background. We don't need the background. There are a number of ways we can do that. Because the background's just this one color, I think the easiest thing to do is to just identify this color and get rid of it. So I'll just use this magic wand tool, hit the shift key, so I have an additive wand in different zones of the image. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's really just 4 areas here. Identify that, and that's it. I could just delete this. Something like that. Whoa, that's interesting. That's not what I was planning to do. I think what I'll do is just make a mask. Let's back out. I'm going to invert my selection. So instead of selecting all the background, it's now selecting everything but the background, which turns out to be the subject. And then with that selection, I'll do a mask. And there we go. So I'm ready to work with this subject. Before I bring it into the background, I need to apply this mask. I basically don't want to work with a mask with what I'm about to do, so I'm going to right-click this mask thumbnail and apply the mask. So now it is what it is. This is what I was attempting to do, just selecting these areas, deleting it, but then her face showed up everywhere, and I freaked out. So I'm going to do it with the mask. Now that I've applied this image, I can click on this layer, hold this, and drag it over to my other document via the tab, the document tab. Just come back onto this work area and let go. And here's my subject. I'll name these layers, subject, and I'll turn this into a layer and call it the background. Okay, so that they're just two equally classified layers in my document. Let's work on the subject. First thing we're going to do is turn it into a smart object. We're going to go through a process of running filters and whatnot. And in this process, there's going to be a lot of filtering being applied, and we want to be able to edit that. So if I don't turn it into a smart object, then all those filter runs are destructive, and we will not be able to change anything. The reason why we do want to change things is because maybe I change my mind about a setting. All these filters are going to be probably related to each other. Like I'll apply one, then I'll apply another to compensate for something in the previous filter, and et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to turn this subject layer into smart object. We'll right click on the subject layer and find the convert to smart object. It has a little icon in the lower right corner to indicate that it's a smart object. Let's go ahead and resize. Command T for transform. I'll hold the Option key down for proportional resizing. We want something, let's see, our reference is mostly full frame, a little bit of headroom there. So let's just find the equivalent of that. Because my subject is cropped at the bottom and at the left holding this flag, I guess I'm limited to placing the subject in this corner. That's about right. I'll commit this. So now we have a composite. We've got our subject placed against our background. Let's do some treatment on the subject to get away from the photorealism and get toward some of these things that we see as part of the Grand Theft Auto style. First thing we'll do is maybe we'll increase the, make it a little bit brighter. So because it's a smart object, I can now run any number of adjustments or filters, and it will apply those adjustments or filters as non-destructive. So let's take a look at what that looks like. We're gonna lighten up the shadows here. Take a look at the skin tone. We just want to brighten it up. See that? Just brighten it up a little bit. Solarized. I'm just kind of like eyeballing it right now. No particular formula. But once I commit, you'll see here in the layers control window, my shadow adjustment is now a it's a smart filter, and I can toggle it off if I want. I can click on this little icon of sliders, and I can apply some blending modes to it. It's a whole bunch of things I can do. And the most important thing I can do is I can double click on the filter, and I can change my settings. So very important, especially when we just need to artistically, visually feel our way through our work. Okay, so I've brightened it up a little bit. Probably one thing we need to do is to smooth out these details. So give it a painting feel, painterly feel, move away from this photorealism stuff. I mean, it is a photograph. So we'll go to filter. There's an oil paint filter here. All right. So you see what this oil paint filter is doing. It's taking these details and really moving away from something photorealistic. It's now a little bit more impressionistic. So I'm going to play with the brush settings. You can see here that as I increase the stylization, it increases this feeling of brush strokes. So I just want a little bit of stylization. Let's see what happens here. The main goal with the oil paint is to bring in a sense of brushwork, move away from a sense of photographic work. With the oil paint filter, the one thing you want to avoid is this lighting option. See, this lighting is approximating light falling on a surface where paint has been applied. So we want to actually retain the apparent surface of the subject, so we don't want the lighting. That'd be the explanation for that. So here we can see we've made a little bit of change, and it's pretty significant, right? This is very photographic, and this is not as photographic. Okay. So here's the new oil paint filter. They stack, so when you're reading your smart filters, the one that was applied first is at the bottom, and they influence each other. So kind of like adjustment layers. We're creating layers of effects, but they're packaged as smart filters because they're generally previous to current versions of Photoshop. These filters and adjustments were located from solely in the top menu, and they were destructive. So this is quite a big deal for Photoshop of the last couple of years. Okay, so now that we've got a way of moving away from photorealism, let's see if we can add some of those lines. I'll try the filter gallery. So in the filter gallery, there's a whole bunch of different types of filters that will apply onto your layer. The key with these is that you have to be able to explore them, and then probably run a blend mode on them, to really be able to mix it with the other filters that you're working with, and to retain some aspect of the original. So I'm going to try one here called Poster Edges. It actually puts in these lines. You see these lines that are showing up. And then I can play with things like the thickness. these edges. And then this posterization. I'm going to try something like this. And I see there's a lot of little pieces of junk here. I can clean that up, so I'm not going to worry about that too much. See, something like this looks better, but I don't have as much line. Let's try this. Okay. So one thing I can do here is maybe let's go in here and take the opacity down. Okay. So I'm gonna now do a little bit of cleanup. See, I kind of like what's happening up here. We're getting some style into the hair, and it looks like, you know, it's being painted or drawn. We have some lines happening now in the, you know, in the framing of our subject elements. I don't like these bits, but we can, plenty of things we can do. Since we're in this whole filter kind of run, we're gonna keep running filters. At some point you could start just manually cleaning up or overpainting or something like that. Maybe we'll do that at some point, but let's just keep going with these filters. All this stuff is noise, so there's a whole noise filter group. We can reduce noise, and here's our noise. See, look at all that. Look at that work that's being done. Noisy, less noisy. I think really just working the strength of the noise is the key. Now that we have made some noise, we need to, with what's remaining, sharpen it up a little bit. So I'll just do a unsharp mask. Still a bit of noise. Maybe we can smooth out the noise. Use a smart blur. The key with a smart blur is to is to probably keep this quality on low. Okay. And then let's finally do a let's try one more from the filter gallery. There's one here called cut out. This definitely will need to use a blend mode for you to see the effect of but yeah, let's choose middle amount of Levels. All right. So this one, filter gallery, let's set it to a soft light. All right. And let's dial it back. Yeah, this is okay. So let's go in here and take a look. See the style here? This is I'm not sure what resolution these images are. They're probably low res. They're probably 72 because look at the size. But this is now in the realm of illustrative quality. We have the kind of we have some continuous tone, but we also have some banding, which would be, you know, right up the alley of this style. There's sense of shape and color, and a mixture of photorealism and illustrative. Now, the face, we've really lost a lot. I'm not too worried at this point because I'm going to actually overlay the original photograph on this painterly rendering that we've done and bring some of the detail back. So keep in mind that as you're watching this demo, I'm not going in a straight line. I'm not starting from source material and going straight to the effect that I want. I'm building up certain qualities that I want this element to have, and then I'm going to bring in other things that maybe I discarded or abandoned along the way. That's just the nature of Photoshop. That's the nature of the painterly approach anyway. You know, if you think about traditional painting, you just keep on putting paint on there, and you discover something you like, and then you discover what had to go away as part of that, and then you've got to bring that other part back. So think of it that way. There's a bit of artifacting here. We'll clean all that up in due time. But this is probably a decent step toward the subject. Okay, so maybe what I'll do here is let's add a mask right away. Go to black, and we'll just get rid of this. Okay, so let's call that not done, but good enough for this step. Let's work on the background a little bit. You see that we've got this source image still completely. We need to change that. One thing we could do is to just get it into the neighborhood of this work here, this painterly work from the subject, is we can copy this whole smart filter group over to the background. If we do that, this layer has to be a smart object. So we'll convert it to a smart object. Get that icon to indicate it's a smart object. Now we can go to this smart filters header and then copy it over. I'll hold down the option key and let me click and drag this. You see that little double circle icon? Drop it onto this background. And immediately the style changes. It changes in line with this here, my subject. And then if I click this little arrow, I'll see the smart filter lineup. I can go in and edit them differently if I want. So it gives me a good way to get in the neighborhood, and I don't have to repeat all those steps. So one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a saturation adjustment layer over the background and dial it back. Okay. And then maybe I will drop a color adjustment layer. Set it to soft light, dial it back. Okay. And just to get a different mood and tone from background to foreground, I should probably pick a color that that contrasts. So instead of this warm, let's go for, let's look around. All right, it's good enough for now. The great thing about this being an adjustment layer is I can just go change it. All right. A couple things at this point. One, I did mention that I want to bring back some detail into the face, so I will bring the original source image back into this composite. The other thing that I'm kind of noticing right now that I see this composite in this state, is that this background image is a flag and a fireworks explosion. It's not an environment. And one thing about these Grand Theft Auto images, I mentioned they're really environmental portraits. They show an environment. So this is not really doing that yet. So I'm wondering if I can bring another image in here and turn it into an environmental portrait. I think I can. Why not? Let's get browser going here. And let's see. Fireworks. Displays. Let's just look for some images. Yeah, something like this. Something with an environment. I mean, let's see. When I look at this picture, what kind of subject, what kind of environment would this subject be in for it to become an environmental portrait? Bikini, flags, I don't know. Disneyland? No, I'm not gonna have a blonde in a bikini at Disneyland. Maybe Florida. Okay. There's Disneyland. I guess Disney World is there. Here's one. Look at this. Here's an environment. South Florida. This is kind of cool. Let's check it out. Let's try it. Can I just drag this? Okay, let's grab that. Where are you? Here you are. Okay, this is pretty good because there's some people here. It's got some kind of time-lapse thing going on. There's some interesting colors, nighttime, in environment, sense of space. I'm into it. So let's grab this and bring it in. Oh, it's smaller. A little bit smaller, no problem. Just resize it to fill the frame. And let's put it in the lineup. I'm going to put it here in the back. And what I can do is well, first let's do this. I'm improvising at the moment. I'm just trying to build a composite of the background. I want some environment to be in here. I want to keep this because that's part of the source imagery. But let's make it a little smaller. It doesn't need to be huge. Let's see if I put it here. Take a look at that. Let's resize this so that there. Just fit that flagpole right there. Okay. Let's take this one. Scoot it. So now I have a full composite. What if I do this? They're looking that way. Maybe I can let's take this image, this background grassy image, and let's flip it. Because there's all this stuff. This is the space I need to fill here. So if I get all these people, and I have them over here looking this way, there. What else is there? What is this thing? That's a guy. I'll try this. I want this guy and this guy to fill up my lower right frame. Let's turn this into a smart object, and then let's where did it go? Oh, sorry. I had both of these selected. I just want this one selected. Okay, and now I'm gonna copy this. Oops. Copy the smart filter into this. Okay. Now let's grab this, and this, and this, and I'm selecting this dark area of this fireworks display. Maybe let's see what happens if I grab these. Then I'm going to invert the selection and create a mask. All right. So now I've integrated this flag and this explosion with this new background scene. I do need to do some work on it, like this here. Let's hide this. Oops. Okay. I guess this image doesn't go all the way over. Okay. So far so good. I feel like the effects here on the background are too strong, so I'm gonna dial them back. I don't remember what they were. Let's just click into this filter gallery, see what this is. Okay, poster edges. So I'm going to take this guy, filter gallery, and let's see what happens when I dial it back quite a bit. Turn that into soft light for both of these. Okay, so that's good. I also want to make it less. What's this one? Yeah, my cutout. I'm going to change my cutout. Just going to change the blending modes on these. Overlay 10. Let's change this one too. Again, my decisions are arbitrary. I'm going for an effect. I want this background to feel visually different, both in terms of tonality, in terms of texture, in terms of luminosity. I want to get this kind of visual priority going. So yeah, maybe I'll even change the amount of the cutout. Change it to 3. Let's do it on both. Okay, that's better. Maybe I'll increase the amount of the blur. Let's go 60, 50. I could be just doing it on one and copying it over, but you're just kind of looking at my my style at the moment, which is to fiddle and tinker. All right, the other thing I want to do here is take this explosion and put it behind these people, because it's kind of, it shouldn't really be here like that. So here's this mask. I think I can just probably go into this mask and paint black. Yeah. I mean, one thing I can do here is make a selection, quick selection over this area, which is my foreground. Go to my background, mask, and brush into this area, and it effectively places the explosion behind. Okay. Okay, I'll just desaturate a little bit more. Okay, that's pretty good. What I'm going to do now is bring some detail back into the face of my subject. So I'm going to go over here to my subject layer. Let's copy it. Subject face detail. So I've got a duplicate layer here. Let's turn off the filters. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is, with these filters turned off, I'm going to go to the mask. I've masked the whole thing out. So now I'm going to get my brush. I'm going to dial my brush down, set to white, so setting to reveal. Reveal some aspect of this very detailed layer. I'm going to brush detail back into selective parts of the subject, which would be the face. All I need to do. Maybe I'll bring a little bit back into certain parts of the hair. And just like in this reference photo, there's some parts where a little bit of detail adds to the richness of the character. You get to decide what that is going to be with your character. I'm going to just say it's the hair and facial features. I don't know. Let's see what happens when I do the flag here. Just a little bit. My thinking is I'm looking at the shadow areas in particular. Often effects like this are not about, you know, the readability. It's about the, you know, the effect that you're doing is one of creating luminosity contrast. So let your let your details accentuate that work. Okay, so here is the result. This is how we started, and look at the difference. If I think it's too much, I can take this and turn it into a blend mode. Or I can dial it back. Maybe I'll just do this normal and dial it back with the opacity. About here. Okay. All right. So that's my painterly work. This is my recovery of character detail. There's some more little cleanup things here from my original mask. A little sloppy, but hey, you know, this is a demo. And I'll save this file anyway, so you can go in and take a look at everything. I'm going to call it here because I think we've covered enough of the basics that you can create a plan of your own for your own work. And then you've got some ideas on how you can solve certain challenges of making the whole image come together. But again, remember the key elements of this particular style and how we you know, can use Photoshop to create that. Here we go. Maybe one more thing is there's this little logo. Let's get the logo. Let's see. Google Chrome. Lofo. I don't actually play this game, so I don't know about it except that you kill people in your neighborhood. So I don't know what this 5 is. I'm just going to grab this. Okay, let's download this. There it is. All right, so we've got the logo. Let's place it. It's big, so we will resize it. Look at this space right here. It's perfect. It's just waiting for it. So we'll move it into position here. Let's use our magic wand tool to get rid of these little bits and smaller maybe. Okay. Thanks for watching, and have fun creating your own Grand Theft Auto style artwork.